So, for example, science can't form conclusions about mathematical and logical truths. And the irony is that you need mathematical and logical truths before you even start having science. And to argue the other way around would be like arguing in a circle. Fundamentally, science can't always form conclusions about things that we already know to be true. For example, if we read the philosopher C.A. Cody when he talks about testimony, many of us, for example, in a very crude way, we believe that we had a great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother. Nothing to do with empirical evidence, because we don't have her DNA and we don't have her grave. It's just because we're here alive today. So it's a philosophical, rational inference rather than something empirical. So just from these two examples, using mathematics and logic, necessary truths, and also using, for example, very crude examples about having a great-great-great-great-great-grandmother, it shows that science is not the only way to form conclusions about reality. And that's something that we have to appreciate. Otherwise, we'll be falling into the trap of the logical positivists in the 1960s saying everything you talk about has to be verified physically. And that itself, I think, is a very crude...
No, I'm sorry, there's a fundamental misunderstanding here. The example that you gave of verifying your own of having an ancestor because other people have ancestors, this is well within the definition or, accepted use of scientific methodology. Not everything has to be physical. Not everything must be empirical, but certainly having empirical evidence is of any kind is a benefit.
Sure.
So you see, they're asking for an example of how to draw objective conclusions about the world outside what we consider the scientific method, and what you gave didn't really stray outside that. So in essence, we're still waiting.
Maybe to your view on science, but
no, not to my view.
Okay, because even within scientific...
Can you get a definition then? Because here in Texas, my wife is a school teacher, and here in Texas, they have the outlines for education state that science is defined as a way of looking at the natural world.
Yes.
Okay? Now, there are no magical manifestations as opposed to material mechanisms. There's only material mechanisms in science. There's only things that can be verified by some means. Now, we can assume that many things might exist, but you can't go so far as to say that anything actually does exist unless you have substantial empirical evidence indicating positively that it does.
Okay.
Otherwise, we would consider it dishonest assertion.
Can I add something before we let Hamza respond?
Sure.
Essentially, I'm getting some echo from someone. It's you again, Aaron. Essentially, Hamza, your example of inferring that you have an ancestor, at its core, is not that dissimilar from Aaron's elaborate example of the transolution crossing of people from Siberia to the Americas. Sure. It's just that he cites many more individual cases of bits of evidence that compose this complete picture. But at its core, you're actually using the same method, because you have these interlocking observations.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, well, that means we're on the same kind of ground here. That means you shouldn't be surprised when we make when we reason to the best explanation, which is called an inference, when we infer from, yes, I know you said contested premise, which is there is fine-tuning, but say for argument's sake there was fine-tuning, and I'll give you a load of references for that in a minute. Then the chance and the physical necessity argument is not a very strong argument. The best inference is the design.
No, I disagree. But we have a number of people waiting to join us. If you're happy to take callers,
sure.
Let me see. The first one I'd like to bring in, I know he's been waiting patiently, is John. If you could just make sure that you mute Blog TV for me, please, John, and we'll get you in. There we go. It takes a few seconds, Hamza. I'm sorry about this.
It's all right.
It also helps if he's at the end of the phone and actually answers, but I'm not sure that he is. Oh, yes, he is. Are you with us, John?
Yes, I am.
Can you mute Blog TV and try and... Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, I'll close the window. Okay.
Right. So also, because we are getting a bit of background noise from you, when you've asked your question, if you could just mute your microphone, that would be helpful.
Okay.
Thank you.
So what I wanted to ask is, I'm a Muslim. I was born to Muslim parents, and I lived all my life as a Muslim, except for the last few years when I've started questioning. What I noticed, the first thing that I noticed is that, all the prayers that we make, like the dua, which is called the dua. Is there any way of testing that, if this thing is any different from self-talk, if there is any conscious being on the other side that accepts the prayers? So, and I started noticing around, and it seems like, there is no way to verify whether prayer is accepted or not.
Okay, thank you for that. For me, anyway, the audio was not very good, but I think you're asking whether any tests have been done, or whether it can be whether prayer can be tested. And I think the answer is yes, and it has been. But who would like to address this first?
I think sensibly Hamza should go first, and then Aaron myself.
Yeah, I mean, sure.
Have any tests been done on the power of prayer, and what results?
Well, there's various answers to this. The first one is this is extremely highly personal. Many people would argue, Christians and Muslims and anyone from a religious faith would say, yes, my prayers are always answered. However, funnily enough, there was this Christian philosopher who produced this book. I can't get the name off my head. I'll Google it and give you the name. Apparently, he did a positive correlation between prayers and them getting answered, and he found a positive statistical correlation. But to be honest, for me, that doesn't even constitute proof.
Whoa. That is an extraordinary claim. And I invite you to do provide us with a source for that. And if you are not able to do it immediately, then send us a message. And when these videos are subsequently posted onto YouTube, I will add an annotation to the paper that you are referring to.
Yeah, but in the short term, I'm afraid we're going to be forced to throw that out, because we've seen many similar claims that have been investigated, and it turns out that it was either complete fiction or they cooked the books.
I agree.
So if you have a source, go ahead.
I agree with you. For me, I mean, unfortunately, I don't see how that's a good position to leave a particular tradition. But the point I would make is, see, with things like this, for me, I take it from a different view. I'm thinking, if I have good reasons to believe a creator exists, and have good reasons that the expression of the creator...
Sorry, Hamza, we're getting a lot of background noise. I don't know where it's coming from.
I think it might be from John.
John, I'm going to remove...
Yeah, only unmute when you're ready to... Oh, you had to remove... Okay.
Sorry, I'm going to remove him. There was too much background noise. And don't worry, I know there are other callers. I'm coming to you soon. Sorry.
Yeah, with regards to... I just want to be as quick as possible in this question. With regards to verification, I saw a source from a Christian philosopher or psychologist or something. I'll get you that source. However, in absence of that, for me, I don't even think that question is really even an adequate question, it's a good question, but it's not a question that is a philosophical undercutting defeater for a particular tradition.
Yeah, I think it's a very straightforward question. Is there evidence that prayer works? And I think the answer is that you may be able to provide us with a paper that suggests it is. But what I find curious is the way that you seem to be somewhat dismissive, as if to say, and again, I'm much more familiar with talking to Christians, but we hear frequently from Christians, God is not meant to be tested. And it seemed that, to a degree, your answer was effectively saying the same. We can't test God. It would be wrong to do so.
I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying it's such a complex question because, you could get theologians saying, well, it's because you didn't pray properly or there's something wrong with you. And you could have all these silly type of discussions. And I'm thinking it's a question that probably would never be able to get answered. It's a personal thing. For instance, myself, I could say, yes, my prayer...
Evidence of the success of prayer is not a personal thing.
Well, if you ask someone personally, that question is personal. Yeah, if there hasn't been any kind of longitudinal correlational studies, then we would never know.
Can I ask, okay, I'm sorry, it seems like we're spinning our wheels. Obviously, Muslims pray a lot relative to other religions. It seems to me that the rank-and-file observant Muslim who does the salat, And then, of course, you have the 5 prayers a day, and then you can pray at other times of the day as an individual. It seems that, on average, the rank-and-file observant Muslim does as much praying as a priest or monk from another religion. And if we were to take, the 1.7 billion self-identified Muslims down and round it down generously and say that only 1 billion are perfectly observant, always giving the 5 prayers every day, then that works out to 5 billion prayers every 24 hours. Now,
Sure.
Of these prayers, of the 5 daily prayers, do you think you could give us an approximate picture of what is the ratio of praise for the sake of praise and what is actual prayer taking the form of request?
Well, essentially, you see, Muslims pray first and foremost because it's an actualization of the oneness of God. So we want to worship God, okay? And this is the essence of prayer, and it's actually good for us. God doesn't need it. It's actually been prescribed because we believe in the Islamic tradition that it's good for our soul, it's good for ourself, our psychology, our behavior, that kind of what we call tarbiyah, the cleansing and purification of the heart, right? Now, that's the essence of prayer, to connect with God. However, the essence of prayer is not always just to ask for things all the time. Oh, that's called dua. So,
okay, I have to jump in again. Okay, you're talking about something that you have identified as being good for the soul. You haven't identified any way of determining how good or bad it might be for the soul, which you haven't verified even exists.
I say
I'm just speaking myself. I cannot base assumptions atop assumptions that are themselves based on nothing but other assumptions.
Sure,
I need to have something that shows that there is some substance that is actually there. Because, as I said before, the belief system that demands faith already has admitted its own weakness, because nothing in reality either requires or desires faith except a bad salesman. Then you're just trying, maybe it's because you need to sell it, but it's not really there. If it were really there, it wouldn't require faith.
Well, that's again going back to the existence of God, and essentially we would argue there are very strong reasons for the existence of God. Take this very simple thing as an example.
Give me a very strong reason for the existence of God, and I don't mean science can't explain something science actually could explain.
Sure.
If science can't explain it, we've already established, then saying it's magic is still the wrong answer. It's always been the wrong answer.
Just like the
will always be the wrong answer.
Of course. The premises are simple. You've probably heard it before. William Lane Craig, the philosopher, Christian apologist, also talks about it as well.
Please don't cite William Lane Craig.
Premise number one. Although it's an Islamic argument based upon Al-Ghazali, the famous 11th century theologian. Premise number one, whatever begins to exist as a cause. Premise number two, the universe began to exist, therefore it's a logically sound and valid argument, and it necessitates that the universe is a cause. Now, upon conceptual analysis...
No, stop. I'm sorry. Pause, everyone. Pause, please. Right.
Yes.
Now, the reason that I've interrupted you, and I apologize for doing so, is that we hear this argument. Sorry, Owen, mute your microphone. There's some echo coming up. We hear this argument from not only yourself as a Muslim, we also hear it from Christians. Okay. Now, even if we concede all of the argument, you have still got a possible hurdle to go. Owen, can you mute? You've got an impossible hurdle to go from the conclusion of the kalam to the fact that it is your particular favourite God.
Yeah, okay,
right?
Good. Well,
you are never going to get over that hurdle. So assume that we concede all of those points.
Can I tell you why I can conclude that? Is because if we do come to the conclusion there is a cause, a metaphysical cause for the universe that has a will, because if it's eternal and it brought the finite effect called the universe into existence, it indicates it has a will because it chose the universe into existence. Now, if that's an assumption, then we go to Revelation now and we say, look, the Quran itself is an inimitable text.
Hold on again. I have a problem with the premise. Yeah. And let me explain why. Understand, we hear this argument every 2 weeks. I've heard this argument every 2 weeks or every day. Yes. For more than a decade. And I've tried to explain the holes in it, and I get the same argument again, and they don't get it. Let me try to give you an explanation of where I'm at and why that argument is so useless. Gravity, we know, gravity creates a depression of sorts, is the way it's described conceptually. Gravity creates a depression in the fabric of space-time. Got it? Right? You accept that, right?
I accept what you're saying.
Okay. Now, excessive gravity creates a deeper impression. Really excessive gravity is said to actually punch a hole in the fabric of space-time, and this is what black holes are supposed to be. Really excessive gravity punching a hole through the fabric of space-time. Now, when a black hole is massive amounts of matter compressed into a single unit, punches a hole in space itself. Now, what about when you get other matter in that also? I mean, because now they have the concept of supermassive black holes and what they can compress. And where does it come out when it goes in? Does it come out anywhere? Here's a concept. It could be that you could have 1,000 galaxies collide into each other in a boiling mass, and space appears to be boiling. It's a churning, chaotic mess of constant collisions. Very few things maintain balance for very long before it's all calamity. Now, if you have a supermassive black hole, compresses everything into a single singularity, and it comes out, hypothetically, into a new emerging inflation of its own new universe. And this can be a cyclic pattern of continuous, eternal repetition without any intent or will or design, and it absolutely would not at any point ever imply a genie using an incantation of magic words, especially when that genie was evidently imagined by people who won't exist for another 14 billion years. This is the problem I have with the assumptions atop assumptions atop assumptions atop assumptions with no basis whatsoever in any aspect of your argument.
No.
You follow me?
What you just said,
Hamza, to be fair to you, and I will obviously allow you to respond, but if I may, Hamza, if I may, because I've got other I'm getting echo. Please, if you're not talking, can you mute your microphones? Okay. Hamza, I will allow you to address that question. I've got no problem with that. But I think the best way of expressing this point is in this way. We have heard not only the arguments you're presenting, whether it is the kalam cosmological argument or whether it is the rewriting of Paley's watchmaker argument, which you produce in a book you kindly gave me in Dublin, The Man in the Red Underpants. We have heard all of these arguments before. They have failed when they have been presented by Christians, and they don't get any better by the fact that you may be somewhat more eloquent than your average Christian. We've heard more before. What is your best, one last chance before we take the next caller, your best piece of evidence for the existence of your God?
Well, first and foremost, what Aaron Ross said about the inflationary models, that's also based upon a lot of assumption too, specifically mathematically. I mean, and your counter argument here is not an undercutting defeat in any shape or form. It still necessitates, according to other models, that there's a beginning in time and there's a beginning to the universe. So, I mean, to be honest, Aaron, I think what you do is like it's almost like a cut and paste from a scientific journal. Oh, there's an answer for the universe. It's like you really want to squeeze a metaphysical cause out of the window.
Can you mute your microphone? We can't hear.
Well, I was about to address his point, and I didn't want to hit the button while talking.
Let me finish my point. So the point is, if whatever begins to exist has a cause, this principle, whatever begins to exist have a cause, is an a priori principle, which means in philosophy, or even in the philosophy of science, it's knowledge independent from experience. We cannot deny this. And if you want more further clarification, we talk about this. The second point is that the universe had a beginning. We could do this philosophically about the infinite regress of historical events, or we could do this when we talk about different varying models of the Big Bang, also known as the hot standard model, and all the other types of models. Now, the logical conclusion for me, there must be a cause that's metaphysical. Now, we say that this cause is Allah, the Creator, the Muslim.
Yes, you've made an assumption that it is what is effectively described as a magical genie. But in all of the examples I gave you before...
Let me finish my argument. There's no point in me being here if you don't let me finish. Sorry, guys, yeah?
I'm sorry, and can I also ask, I don't know where it's coming from, but there is a lot of background. If you're not talking, please mute your microphone. Hamza, we asked you here to ask your views. That is certainly the case. I do think that there are occasions, though, where you are not answering a very straightforward question.
Yes.
Can we revisit kalam later? Because before we take the new caller, I think that we didn't really explore the question of the previous caller about the efficacy of prayer. So I'd like to say a few things about that, if you don't mind.
Please.
Okay. Hamza, you know that game in arcades where it's this glass box and it has the claw at the top, and then there's all the stuffed animals? Right. Now, this is a notoriously difficult game, and you go there, and there might be, for example, a watch, and you want the watch, so you put a quarter in, you put the claw down. It, of course, slips out of the claw, and then you're out a quarter. Now, we've established that Allah gets 5 billion prayers every 24 hours, and they're all across different time zones. So he gets a constant stream of prayers coming in.
Yeah, he does.
Now, whether they are prayers that take any kind of request for them to aid the prayer, on any matter, or whether they're simple praise asking nothing in return, I think it would stand to reason that the people praying, whether they expected it, whether they were asking for it, whether they were hoping for it, would receive some benefit. Because even if every Muslim only ever prayed prayers of absolute praise, asking nothing in return, I still think that they would achieve some benefit. It's like when you're a kid and you go and you visit your grandfather or great-grandfather, and they just give you cash spontaneously. Not because you asked for it, but because they're pleased with you. And it seems that if you have a God who wants people to pray to him, there are some who pray, there are some who don't, then those who pray will, I think, rationally, logically be rewarded. But when you have 5 billion quarters being put into that claw machine, and at the end of the day, you're out 5 billion quarters and you have no watch, are you really going to do the same thing again the next day? Because in my opinion, and let me preface this by saying, I mean absolutely no disrespect to people who are struggling in the developing world, the Muslim world or otherwise. I'm not trying to gloat about the apparent success of the West or rub salt in anyone's wounds. But it can't be ignored that when you look all over the Muslim world, you see a wide variety of problems: poverty, civil unrest, high illiteracy rates, lack of basic services, and other things. And again, I'm not trying to gloat or be disrespectful to them, but you just can't ignore that they've put more prayer by far than certainly other people of the book, Christians and Jews, who are you think their prayer wouldn't have 100% effectiveness because they're not following the true religion. And then you have people who don't pray at all or pray to gods other than the God of Abraham. It just does. It seems like it's an open and shut case as to what that caller was asking about the efficacy of prayer. It'd be like if we had 1.7 billion petri dishes and they all gave a negative result for what we were testing for.
Okay.